You took me for a ride, and now we're lost. I'm talking all your pollution trends.
You're making me call, you're turning me on. I'm breaking this relationship.
Gasoline, gasoline, you're driving me insane. Gasoline, gasoline, the world's a flame. Gasoline, gasoline,
I found someone new, someone
better than you. We had a good run, but now we're done. You're poisoning our atmosphere.
You don't even care, pumping dirt in our air, leading us on, the end is near.
You fossil fool, I reject your rule.
We gotta leave you in the ground. I'm out of the door, with my foot to the floor. We gotta leave you in the ground.
Gasoline, gasoline, you're driving me insane. Gasoline, gasoline,
The world's aflame.
gasoline, gasoline, I found someone new, someone better.
Better than you.
Sea levels are rising.
All the best are dying.
Our children are crying.
Around the world, countries are racing to phase out gasoline cars.
Gotta go quick, electric.
Change the way we move around.
Gotta go
Quick, electric. Change the way we move around. I got a new love, an electric flame.
with 3 city charging and VIP parking. Zooming past you in the HOV lane.
I'm clean and green, and my love is sparking. Gasoline, gasoline,
I got a new dream.
gasoline, gasoline. I'm going green. Gasoline, gasoline. I found someone new,
And I'm leaving.
leaving you.
Plug in America, goodbye exhaust. Get on the same page, electric cars are boss. Well, change is happening, we are listening, what are you waiting for? Plug in America, EV drivers, we need more. Yeah, we need more. Plug in America, it's catching on. Fossil fuel is wrong, wrong, wrong. We breathe the same air, deserve clean air. What do you gotta say? Plug in America, EV drivers are leading the way. Leading the way. Plug in America.
That was Hope Levy. And the video you saw as you maybe were coming in was from Cultura. So thank you, Cultura. It's called Gasoline, Gasoline. So welcome all who are joining us on Facebook Live. Happy Earth Day. This event is a celebration of the Earth and an opportunity to learn more about electric vehicles and how a switch from gasoline to electric vehicles can help our society accomplish a carbon-free future. My name is Steph Larson. I am with the Clean Transportation for All campaign at Sierra Club. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm speaking to you today from Northern New York. We have a great Earth Day tribute planned for you all for the next hour. So thank you to Sierra Club, to Plug in America, and to the Electric Auto Association. We hope you enjoy it and we'll learn something new. And I don't do this every day, so I apologize if some of these transitions are a little choppy. But I would like to introduce our speakers for today. That's me, Steph Larson. I also have Hugh Lay from Sierra Club with me as well. And we have some really special guests lined up for you today, including Leilani Munter, who is an environmental activist, professional race car driver, and documentary filmmaker. We've got Dan Neo, who is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal. We've got Lloyd Levine, and who is a volunteer with Electric Auto Association and a former legislator for the state of California, and also Roman Vasquez, who is a volunteer with Plug in America. And I want to recognize right now this important moment that we're in. Drive Electric Earth Day, as you may or may not know, was supposed to be 150 in-person events around the country. And we can't do that right now. This is a really difficult time for a lot of people. And I really want to appreciate everyone joining us today, especially as we are in such uncertain times. We're grateful for your time and attention. We hope this experience brings you some joy, even though we can't be all together in person in various locations, kicking some tires on some electric vehicles. So to kick us off, I would love to invite Lloyd Levine to talk to us a little bit about, you know, when we say electric vehicles, what do we mean by that? What exactly are we talking about? So take it away, Lloyd.
Great, thank you. I hope you guys can hear me. So
Fine.
let's go through a quick brief history of time. In the beginning, which was, as you can see, 1997, there were two electric vehicles, a Honda and an EV1 by GM. And actually, the EV1 by GM was my introduction to electric vehicles. When I was, not too long out of grad school, I was working for the California State Legislature long before I was elected. And they had a lobby day, and they have all these year-round where different groups come to the Capitol to introduce you to their members, to their technology, to their products, all different sorts of things. So I had the opportunity to go down and drive an electric vehicle. Now, I had never seen one, but I said, well, I'd love to go do this. Now, in my mind, I am still thinking of an electric vehicle back then as a glorified go-kart or golf cart or lawnmower, something, basically made out of styrofoam with all the weight stripped off of it so that it can, it can actually function. So I got down there and I saw the red car on the screen, and I thought, well, that actually looks kind of nice. And I got in the car and we quietly zoomed down the ramp and onto the streets. And I had my window down, my arm hanging out the window, and I'm driving along. And I said to the person I was asking a bunch of questions, I said, can I punch it? See how fast this goes? And I had no idea anything about electric vehicles. And the woman says, sure, but hold on. I said, oh, what do you need me to wait for? She says, no, grab the wheel with both hands. And I said, oh, okay. And so I did, and I punched it, and the car snapped me back in my seat. And that was my introduction to electric vehicles. Next slide, please. And then I'm hopeful everybody on the call recognized this. This was, there was a big gap between the first two electric vehicles and this. This is the iconic Toyota Prius. It's the car that started the movement, really. It was the first mass market, widely popular electric vehicle available. And it sold in huge numbers. It was driven by a wide variety of celebrities, became very popular, and it was the first true hybrid on the market. Next slide, please. And then while the hybrid technology in the Prius was selling well and moving to other cars, it was followed by what I would term the first two very popular mass market plug-in cars. The car on the left, the red one, is the first generation Nissan Leaf. At the time, it was the best-selling battery electric vehicle on the market. And on the right is the plug-in hybrid Chevy Volt, something many of you may recognize. And it was the first mass market popular plug-in hybrid on the market as well. Next slide, please. And now in 2020, we have over 40 different cars that plug in. The cars that you see on the screen, plus many more that you can find if you do a quick Google search. All of these are a variety of cars that all plug in, run on battery. None of the ones on the screen are hybrids. These are all pure battery electric vehicles, and they have a wide price range, anywhere from the $30,000 range on up to the Tesla Model X that can reach $100,000. Next slide, please. And before we get into how the vehicles work, I just wanted to put this slide up. As you can see, starting in 2010, they weren't even really registering. And by the way, this is in thousands. And now, each year, the popularity of plug-in electric vehicles has increased. There have been over 1.5 million cars, plug-in electric cars sold in the United States. And some of them are no longer on the road, but there are right now well over 1 million plug-in electric vehicles on the road in the United States, and that number is climbing every year. And in about 15 years or so, 10 to 15 years, depending upon how we do, they expect there'll be more plug-in cars on the road than there will be gas-powered cars. Next slide, please. So let's look at a little bit about how these things work now. So this, again, the red car is the same one that I showed you before, the black car. This is the iconic Toyota Prius. This is what, when we hear about a hybrid vehicle, this is what you're thinking of as a traditional hybrid vehicle. This car does not plug into a wall. And those of us who work in the electric vehicle industry recognize the importance of this car, but we don't consider it an electric vehicle. It does have a battery and an electric motor, but it doesn't plug in. This is what's called a parallel hybrid. As you can see by the diagram on the right, it has a gas tank and a gas engine. It's got an electric motor and a battery pack, and each one of those can drive the wheels, but those two are connected. And so they balance out. That's why it's called parallel. They work together at the same time in parallel, in tandem to power the car. Now, this technology has proliferated and it's gone well beyond the Toyota Prius. It's in the Toyota Highlanders. It's in so many cars these days. But that is how a hybrid technology works. The gas power and the electric power work together. Next slide, please. The car that you see here is a plug-in hybrid, and it's a Pacifica, Chrysler Pacifica. You wouldn't know to see, if you saw this on the road, you wouldn't recognize it. It looks just like a normal Chrysler Pacifica. The difference is, in addition to the gasoline engine, this has an electric motor and a battery, and as you can see in the lower right-hand corner of the diagram, it's got a plug. So you can drive that car and plug it in at night and recharge your battery and then drive it again. The way this one works is it's what's called a serial hybrid. The electric motor works until it runs out of battery. And this car will go about 25 miles on the battery before it kicks over to the gasoline engine. So if you're just running errands around town, taking the kids to the nearby park, you'll be on pure electric. If you need to go on a longer distance drive, then you can drive electric for a little bit of the time, and then it shifts over to gasoline, and it's seamless. It's just a seamless transition from one to the other. It significantly improves your mileage because you're driving on electricity most of the time on short commutes. Next slide, please. This is a pure battery electric vehicle. And as you can see from the diagram, there is no gas tank on this one. It has these types of cars have a bigger battery. They just plug in. That is their sole fuel source. The electric motor is their sole propulsion source. On the right below, on the white car, is the second generation Nissan Leaf, and this comes in two variants, and we'll discuss those in a minute. The smaller battery size can take you about 150 miles on a full charge. The larger battery size will go 225 miles on a full charge. The one on top is the latest iteration of Ford's iconic Mustang. The new generation of the Ford Mustang will only be available as a plug-in electric vehicle, and they're expecting, it's not for sale yet, but it will be soon, and they're projecting 300-mile range and all of the performance you would expect in a Ford Mustang. Next slide, please. So why do owners like electric vehicles? Why am I an electric vehicle enthusiast? Well, obviously, we all know they're very environmentally friendly. They have no tailpipe emissions. When you're driving a pure battery electric vehicle, there are no tailpipe emissions whatsoever that come out of the car. Very, very low fuel costs. This is something we'll get into a little bit more later on as we look in depth at understanding charging. But the cost of electricity, the question I always get when I talk to people is, oh yeah, so you're not using gas, but what does it do to your electric bill? Well, electricity, is generally about 25% to 1/3 of the cost of gasoline. So what it does to my electric bill is it raises it a little bit. What it does to my gas bill is eliminates my gas bill. Because they use electric motors, they actually have much better acceleration. For those of you who have been on Google or YouTube, you can always quickly Google, Tesla drag racing, and you will see some remarkable videos of Teslas accelerating off the line, beating any number of sports cars from Lamborghinis to Ferraris to, there's one of my favorite ones is the Tesla Model X, the Tesla SUV, beating an Alfa Romeo sports car off the line in a quarter-mile drag test. The next video they filmed from a different angle, and the Tesla again beats the Alfa Romeo. But what you don't see until the camera pulls out is in the second race, the Tesla is actually carrying a second Alfa Romeo, and it still accelerates so well that it beats the sports car. It's because of the instant torque on the electric motor. It's also smoother acceleration. Electric vehicles also handle better. They drive better. They ride better, because for an electric vehicle, in a gas-powered car, the significant bulk of the weight is the motor, the engine, and that is up front, above or in front of the front axle. For an electric vehicle, the battery is in the middle and down low, so it completely changes and improves the center of gravity for the car. So because of that, you get a much better ride, you get a much smoother and better handling car. Very, very low maintenance. An electric vehicle, as you saw, has no motor, therefore it has no oil to change, it has no spark plugs to change. I know people who have owned electric vehicles for 3 years, and their sole maintenance cost has been a new set of tires. It's very, very quiet and relaxing. When you're in the car, I discovered this when I was stuck in traffic coming back from San Francisco, and I realized I'm not stressed. Well, why am I not stressed? Because my car doesn't have that background hum, and it isn't vibrating. The engine is silent when it's running, and it just doesn't operate at all when the car is sitting still. So it's a much more pleasant environment. And then there's avoiding the gas station. And we'll hear far more about this in the charging section later on. But again, I don't stop at the gas station. I come home at night, I plug in my driveway, and I wake up in the morning and I have a full tank of gas. And who among us has ever said, oh, I really look forward to going to the gas station on a weekly basis? So, for those reasons and many more, we love electric vehicles. My time is coming to an end, but you can certainly reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. I forgot to say this, but if folks have any questions for any of our guest speakers, we will, as time allows, be able to ask a few. And my colleagues at Sierra Club are looking through your questions right now. So if you have questions for Lloyd, for Leilani, for Dan, or anyone else who speaks today, please feel free to put those in the comments of Facebook. All right, thank you so much, Lloyd, for all that great information. And I am now going to share with you a video that discusses one of the perennial questions about electric vehicles, which is, are electric cars really more environmentally friendly? Take it away, SciShow and Hank Green.
Telling people that buying an electric car is a great way to fight climate change is a pretty reliable way to start an argument in some circles. People will say that you still burn fossil fuels with electric cars, it just happens at the power plant instead of the engine. And while that is at least partly true, over their lifespans, electric cars don't consume anywhere near the fossil fuels that gas-powered cars do, especially in the United States. With electricity getting cleaner all the time, they're even better than you might expect. There are a few variables to keep in mind, though, starting with the cars themselves. In the US, as of 2016, the average pure gasoline passenger car goes about 9 kilometers for each liter of gas it burns, or about 22 miles per gallon. But that's just an average. Some go 4 kilometers or so, others go 14. But the fuel efficiency hits higher highs and lower lows when we're talking about hybrid cars or trucks on the interstate. Plus, the act of manufacturing a car leads to greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's electric or not. So does refining gasoline. The major complicating factor here is electricity, and where you live determines how clean your electricity really is. Most electricity in the US uses a combination of natural gas, coal, and nuclear fission, with a bit of water, wind, solar, oil, and a few others thrown in. But those numbers change from state to state and depend on things like local natural gas sources or how windy it is today. For example, Alaska has plenty of natural gas and hydroelectric resources, so its power plants create very little waste when generating electricity. That means a full electric vehicle charge using Alaskan electricity creates roughly the same emissions as a gas engine that drives 48 kilometers per liter, or 112 miles per gallon. That's roughly 5 times the national average and 2 or 3 times better than even some of the best hybrids. It's pretty efficient. But at the other extreme are places like Colorado, which, energetically speaking, is one of the dirtiest states. Sorry, Colorado. About half of Colorado's electricity is from coal, which produces more emissions than just about any other source. But even there, electric cars still outperform gas cars. A full charge off of Colorado electricity equates to about 20 kilometers per liter, 46 miles per gallon, about double the national average based on 2016 figures. That's pretty good. Better still, most of the country is closer to Alaska's numbers than Colorado's. It comes down to this. Power plants are just better at making power than car engines are. One reason is that they're simply bigger. Bigger things don't waste as much energy staying hot, and that makes them more efficient. The story is similar across most of the world, although again, the details change depending on where your electricity comes from. In countries that tend to use more coal, like India or China, electric cars break even with the average gas-powered car in the US, although they are still less efficient than the average Indian gas-powered car. But in water-powered Paraguay or geothermal-rich Iceland, gas engines need to get more than 90 kilometers per liter to beat an electric one. So, are electric vehicles really more efficient than gas? Yes, they absolutely are, unless you have some very dirty electricity. So much for the well-actuallys. But climate change isn't just one problem. It's a hot mess of many problems at once. And it'll take some pretty radical changes from people all over the world to keep that hot mess from getting even hotter. Thanks for asking. And before you go, you may or may not be aware that I wrote a book, and that book is out in paperback now. I didn't tell you about it when it was just hardcover, but now you can get it in value discounted, not as hard edition.
I'm gonna stop Hank there. So that's something to consider.
A book about a girl who gets like famous on the internet, which
sorry. That's something to consider next time you're at a family dinner and someone says, well, actually, and related to electric vehicles. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought. I now have the very, very distinct pleasure and honor of asking a few questions of Leilani Munter. Leilani is an environmental activist, a race car driver, and a documentary filmmaker. Welcome, Leilani. We're so excited to have you here. And I'm going to unmute you. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hi.
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day to you as well. So how did you first get interested in electric vehicles? As a race car driver, I'm sure you're around cars all the time, but what about electric cars in particular drew you in?
Well, so before I became a race car driver, I did earn a degree in biology from the University of California in San Diego. So I've always been an environmentalist, and I think that part of my life actually came before the racing. And then I started racing in 2001, and I raced all the way up until 2019. I ran my last race at Daytona. So I was always concerned about the environment and the human impact that we're having on our environment. And of course, as a race car driver, you know, having to burn gasoline as part of my sport, it was something that I was always interested in, was getting into an electric car. In 2007, I started the commitment to adopt and protect an acre of rainforest every time I drove my race car. And then in 2013 is when I actually got to switch to an electric car for my personal ride. And I took delivery of my Tesla Model S in September of 2013, and I've since driven 93,000 miles in that car. And we added a Model 3 to our garage in March of 2018. So we now have 2 electric cars. And I think we put on another 30,000 miles on the Model 3. Love both of them. As Lloyd was saying earlier, you know, with the 100% torque from zero, as a driver, that's something that I wanted to have in an electric car. I wanted to have the speed. I wanted to have the fun. The handling, of course, is wonderful because the battery is, you know, in the floor of the car. So it's the lowest center of gravity. As a race car driver, that's one of the things we try and do when we go to set up our race cars at the track, is you're trying to get as much weight as possible, as low to the ground as you possibly can. And so that's already achieved in an electric car as they come off the lot. And so the handling is fantastic. And I couldn't be happier. I'll never, ever own or drive a gasoline powered car ever again. And right after we got the electric car, we put solar panels up on the roof. So our house is completely powered by solar, as is the cars that are charging in our garage. So that's really the ideal scenario, and something I had dreamed about for a long time, was to be able to drive a car and not have that guilt of having to burn a fossil fuel while I drove it, and still be able to have fun while I drive the car.
And have you ever run out of charge? Have you ever gotten stuck on the side of the road?
I have not. And I, like I said, 93,000 miles in my personal Tesla. In addition, I drove a Tesla Model S that's highly modified in a film called Racing Extinction. I did another, I think, 10,000 miles in that car, including a 5,000-mile road trip from New York City to San Francisco. And I was zigzagging across the country doing projections with the car. So it wasn't a direct route. That was back in 2015. We had no trouble finding charging. I think the one situation that I got into was, I think, in North Dakota, where we charged at a campground because I wanted to do a projection that was kind of in the middle of nowhere, and there weren't much charging stations around, but we could, go to a campground, and we just connected right up as you would if you were connecting a camper. And it really was no problem. And that was 5 years ago. So the charging infrastructure is just so much better now. It's so convenient. I mean, I remember in 2013, I used an app called PlugShare, where I would actually charge at other electric car owners' garages as I was going to places that didn't have the superchargers. But really, I mean, the reality of it is there's superchargers everywhere, and I have not had to utilize any slow chargers for a couple of years now.
That's so cool. As someone who lives in a town of 1,500, I live 45 miles away from the nearest city. It's, as I personally, I don't own an electric vehicle yet. And as I think about that, that's something that that weighs on my mind. So I'm excited to hear more about charging too from Roman. Tell us more about Racing Extinction, and especially about the car that you got to drive in it.
Yeah, so Racing Extinction is a film from the Oceanic Preservation Society, and it is about the 6th mass extinction of species that we're currently living through. This era, scientists have named the Anthropocene, which translates to the age of man. It's where our human impact on this planet is so great that we're actually changing the fossil record of the future. And right now we're driving species to a rate of extinction that's about 1,000 times faster than the natural background rate. So in the film, they wanted me to drive an electric car and do projections. So I ended up, we did some filming at the Tesla factory. This is back in 2013 when we ordered the car. And then we did some pretty intense modifications to the car. So it has a 15,000 lumen projection system that comes out of the back of the Tesla. So I'm able to project very clear images from, 1,000 feet away. I can project images that, are several hundred feet high. So it had the ability to do these amazing, beautiful projections, and I used it to project imagery of endangered species. It also was the first car in the world with something that was called electroluminescent paint. So with the flip of a switch, the paint in the car could actually carry an electrical charge. So I could change the color of the car. So when I was projecting onto places that I might not have permission to project on, like an oil refinery or something like that, I would have the paint on. And so the car would be this bright blue glowing car. And then when inevitably the oil company would call the police, I could just, with the flip of a switch, turn it off and just look like a normal Tesla. So I could blend in and pull the projector in. It also had a high definition FLIR camera that came out of the front of the car. And that FLIR camera had a special color filter on it that made carbon dioxide and methane visible to the human eye. So I did some projecting around New York City where I would film cars, gasoline cars, and then I would project the live image of that onto a building, like 15-story high building. And the person sitting at the stoplight would actually see themselves live on the screen, but actually be able to see the exhaust that was coming out of their tailpipe. And I think, humans being such visual creatures, that may be one of the reasons why people struggle to understand greenhouse gas emissions and how much we're polluting is you can't see it. So that FLIR camera allowed us to visualize that pollution. And then the last thing it had done to it is I also had a disappearing license plate. So I could, with the flip of the switch, make the license plate go blank.
Interesting. So we do have one question from one of our Facebook viewers, April Bolduck from, actually it doesn't say where she's from, sorry. April Bolduck says, what does Leilani tell the electric vehicle naysayers?
Oh, you know, there is really no argument against electric cars. If you're trying to talk about performance and you're gonna say that it doesn't perform as well, that has all been proven wrong, of course. And you know, obviously Tesla is one of my favorites because it's the one that I have, but there are so many amazing fast electric cars coming out. The maintenance, I have zero maintenance. I've had my car since 2013. Literally the only thing that I've done to it is change the tires. I haven't even had to change my brakes yet because they have regenerative braking in the Model S. So when I lift off of the accelerator, it reverses the magnetic field and it slows the car down using the AC induction motor. So it is just an amazing vehicle. And to not have to ever buy gasoline. I mean, I have not had to go to a gas station unless I was buying a lottery ticket. I haven't gone to a gas station since September of 2013, and I'm literally driving off of free sunshine that lands on my roof every day. It doesn't really get any better than that. And even if you are plugging into the grid, you know, the grid is cleaning up. As time goes on, more and more solar panels, more and more wind turbines are being added to our grid. So the grid is getting cleaner. So an electric car is always cleaner than a gasoline car. But then it's getting cleaner and cleaner over time as the grid improves. When you buy a gasoline car, that thing is dirty the day that you buy it, and it's dirty as long as you drive it. So I don't understand people that argue against electric cars. I remember when I first got my Tesla, there were a lot of people that were saying, oh, congratulations, you've moved from gasoline to coal. And then a couple months after I got the Tesla, I did a picture of my Tesla sitting in front of my house and the last solar panel being set down on my roof. And I just posted the picture, and it was funny. One of the people that was harassing me the most online just said, well, I guess you got me to shut up, didn't you?
Nice. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I so appreciate all of your experience and expertise. And I'm going to transition now to Roman Vasquez. He's a volunteer with Plug in America. Thank you so much, Leilani. And
hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Roman's going to tell us about more about the charging aspects of owning an electric vehicle. So Roman, thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted now?
You are.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is one area that there's tons of confusion. So many questions I get asked about this all the time to people who are considering getting an electric vehicle. And yeah, it's like, how long does it take? How much does it cost? How do I do it? How do I charge my car? And we've been talking about it with Lloyd and Leilani, and everyone's been talking about charging. So let me give you some information about that to hopefully get everyone up to speed on the same level. And obviously, this is something that's happened, right? We've always understood, well, how much does it cost to charge a car, or sorry, a gas-powered car? We've always had them. But an electric car, if you've never had one, or if you've never had if you don't have a friend who has one, this is an area where there's a lot of lack of knowledge. So let me get into it. So charging, you can charge at home, which is one of the biggest benefits of having an electric vehicle, because you have electricity at home, obviously. You have an outlet, you have power coming into your home. So that is the fuel that charges, that drives your electric vehicle. So that's one of the biggest benefits. We can talk about into the little techie stuff about the levels of charging, but suffice to say, there's basically like slow charging, 2 levels of slow charging, and there's fast charging. So let's talk about the slower charging, which is easily available to everyone at home. It's called level 1. Level 1 charges your car to speed of about 3 miles per hour of charge. So for every hour you're plugged in, you can put back in 3 miles of charge. So if you have to, though, leave your car at home, if you have it plugged in for 8 hours, that's 24 miles of charge. So for the average person, that might be enough for your commute. So for most people, a level 1 charger at home may work just fine. But most people actually end up installing a level 2 charger. The biggest benefits of a level 2 charger is the speed. That is almost 4 times as fast. You can charge at 20 miles per hour. So obviously that same 40 mile or 20 mile commute can be charged up in a couple hours. So you have the significant benefit of speed. There's also public charging. A lot of people don't have the access to charging at home, whether you live in a multi-unit dwelling, apartment, you just don't have easy access to plugging at home. There's so many public charging stations out there. We talked about the different apps that show you access to it. I think we might talk about it a little later, maybe after this. So there's a lot of access to public charging, and those typically will charge you about the same speed, about 20 miles per hour. We could also talk about many of the other public charging stations are DC fast charging, much like the Tesla supercharging stations. Those take charging to another level, the speed. For example, most DC charging stations, if your car is so equipped to do DC charging, you can charge your car at about 150 miles per hour. So think about that. Most of the time when I plug in my BMW i3, I'm only plugged in for 30 minutes and I can have completely full charge. And that's, again, a complete game changer if you really need to travel much longer distances where stopping for 20 miles per hour is really not that conducive for you. So that's one of the biggest benefits of electric vehicles, how much access you have to a charging station. How often do I actually public charge? It's not that often. I have the benefit of having a charging station here at home. I also have it available at my workplace. But when I do need to have those particular days, when I do need to drive all over Southern California and I just don't have enough range, my car on the dash, I can just look up, type in where I'm going to go, and it'll tell me, actually, there's a charging station where you need to go. I can add that extra 10 miles of range if I had to. So the access and ability to find public charging stations is so much more improved compared to where we were just even 4 or 5 years ago. So that's one of the biggest benefits. The cost, though, is the biggest question. A lot of people have a question about cost, and I actually just made a recent video about this. So let me break down the cost here. So first, let's start as a baseline. People are mainly coming from cars, right? So Lloyd was talking about the different costs for cars. On average, in that video you showed, it's going to be about 10 cents a mile, depending on the type of car that you have, how much it actually costs to refuel a gas-powered car. An electric vehicle, because your fuel now is electricity, it has the biggest advantage in that the cars are so much more efficient, and the electricity itself in many places is also very, very cheap. So my utility charges me only 13 cents per kilowatt hour. That equates effectively down to 3 cents per mile. So again, gas-powered car, about 10 cents or even worse. An electric vehicle, only about 3 cents a mile. So huge savings right there in driving an electric vehicle. And another question came up about what happens if you don't have access to DC or public charging? You know, what do you do? I think you asked a question about running out of power. Every electric vehicle that I've seen actually already comes built in with a small level 1 unit. I happen to have it right here. Here's the one that comes out of my BMW. It just sits in the trunk, and it has obviously the 110 plug. So anywhere you can find a 110 plug, you have ability to charge up. Again, it's at 3 miles an hour, but it's a huge advantage. And again, whether you're going over to a friend's house or even in a parking lot that just happens to have one available, you always have ready access to electricity.
What's the most fun that you have with your electric vehicle, besides the fact that that you're not using gasoline and breathing exhaust?
You know, I came from, I'm a gearhead. I'm like Leilani. I've always had, you know, gas powered cars, and still love them. But I got to say, I can never go back to gas because just the driving experience is so much better. It's so much quieter, so much smoother and fast. The BMW i3 is what I personally drive. Again, it is just an incredibly smooth car. And I just love shocking people, you know, off the line on the acceleration that it has. Again, I could never go back. I've driven lots of different electric vehicles. You know, even as Lloyd mentioned, I was lucky enough to drive the EV1 back then, and that was an amazing car for the 90s. But even now, they've gotten so much better, and they're just amazing vehicles. Again, I could never go back to a gas-powered car.
As I think about virtual events for the future of Drive Electric Earth Day and National Drive Electric Week, which comes in September, October,
yep.
One of the things I really want to do is have somebody install a dash cam. And I've heard someone call it an instant torque face, like when you experience that EV, like for the first time. I've test driven a couple EVs myself, but never vehicle. So I didn't.
There's two things that are happening there. There's two things that are happening. Yes, it's the torque that you feel it immediately. There's no lag, but also there's no shifting. So there's no like a gas engine has to go through its range of RPMs, right? From it can't go to zero. So it constantly has to shift. And actually manufacturers have realized they have to keep adding more and more gears to get the cars as efficient. So some cars as high as like 8 gears, but most cars will have about 4 gears that they have to use to accelerate, which means the engine has to stop for a second, switch gears, and keep going. Gas-powered cars or electric cars don't have that problem because there's usually no gearing at all. So you just continually accelerate, which is just an amazing feeling.
Roman, thank you so much for talking about your experience with charging. I am now going to do a little activity. So hopefully you guys can see a map of the US. And Leilani, I think, was talking about her experience with charging 5 years ago with PlugShare, which is a resource that any of us can use right now. Google Maps, which many of us are familiar with, I know that I use it all the time, is also now able to tell you where the nearest charging station is. So I'm just gonna demo this really briefly for you. So while you're in Google Maps, you just put in here charging station and a zip code. I used to live in the zip code 20002. So hit send. That zip code is in Washington, DC. And as I zoom in, not out, it will tell me all of the charging stations near that zip code. And I could pick one and have it tell me how to get there from where I'm at. It also, interestingly, tells you what type of charger that is. So this one is a J1772. I'm sure that for people who own electric vehicles, that means something specific. It doesn't mean something specific to me because I don't own an electric vehicle. But so it's just that simple. So then I'm zooming in and I can see, and this is just 20002. So that's a very tight area within DC. And you can see within that tight little area, all of these charging stations. And you can click on one and it will tell you, oh, that one's outside of Mom's Organic Market, or, here's what hotel it's connected to. So it's really that simple. And also a lot of cars that are coming right off the line now will be able to tell you where at any given point where your nearest charging station is from where you physically are, so that you can find a charging station if you're away from home.
Steph, if I could just interject quickly, this map makes it look like there's not a lot of chargers out there. But what I want to point out to people is 85% of charging takes place at home, as Roman said. I don't remember the last time I've used a public charger. I have about a 15-mile commute on a daily basis, drop the kids off at school, come to the office, maybe do a grocery run, that sort of stuff, go home, plug in at night in my driveway. So that's, when I said skipping gas stations, the gas station in a sense is shifted to your garage in the most cases.
Sure, absolutely. And like I said, this makes it kind of look like there aren't a lot of charging stations in DC, but I only put in one of the many, many zip codes in DC. So I didn't actually do this ahead of time, but let's just see what happens. So now there's a lot more in different parts of DC, for example. So thank you for that. I am now going to turn it over to my colleague, Hugh Lay, who's also with the Clean Transportation for All campaign, and he's going to talk a little bit about incentives for electric vehicles. Hey, Hugh.
Oh, hey, Steph. Would you mind showing the slide real quick for everyone?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Happy Earth Day, everyone. My name is Hugh Lay, and I'm the campaign representative with the Sierra Club's Clean Transportation for All campaign. And I wanted to talk a little bit about electric vehicle incentives, because we can't talk about electric vehicles without talking about all the various policies and incentives that exist out there to help lower the costs and other sorts of financial burdens. So incentives are among the most important policy levers that have been spurring electric vehicle adoption. They exist in the forms of either rebates and tax credits and are offered at the federal and state level. All the research that has been shown, they show that incentives are critical drivers to help influence consumers and to transition us away from gasoline vehicles. These incentives lower the upfront cost of an electric vehicle and provide cost parity between gasoline-powered cars. For example, the federal electric vehicle tax credit offers consumers a credit worth up to $7,500, depending on the manufacturer of the electric vehicle. Once a manufacturer has sold 200,000 electric cars, the credit slowly phases out over the next 6 quarters. So far, only Tesla and GM have phased out completely, demonstrating the popularity with some of these models and brands. While many other companies with 2 to 3 dozen other electric vehicle models are not yet close to hitting their 200,000 sales threshold, meaning that people can still qualify for the federal tax credit on other models that aren't Tesla or GM. States, in addition, are also offering their own incentives, which can be combined with the federal ones for huge cost savings. Over 18 states currently offer a rebate or tax credit ranging anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000. And each state has different criteria on how you can qualify for their incentives, depending on the model, your income, size of the car battery, and also caps on the manufacturer suggested retail price, the MSRP. So it's also not just rebates and tax credits. Many other incentives exist as well, whether it be sales tax exemptions, rebates for installing your at-home EV charging station, being given priority access to the carpool lanes. Incentives aren't just offered at the federal and state level, but also by utilities and local cities as well. And so there are many resources out there that provide you with information about what incentives exist in your area that you may qualify for. You can check out plugstar.com, Sierra Club's EV guide, or the Alternative Fuels Data Center for what incentives exist by your state and your zip code. Currently, many organizations are currently advocating for Congress and also for state legislatures to extend these incentive programs to ensure that we're adopting and enacting more policies to help drive these programs and for low and moderate income communities to adopt EVs and to transition us away from dirty fossil fuels and towards cleaner vehicles. So I hope that you check out these resources about what incentives may exist in your area, and you can simply just go in and input your zip code, and it will show you a list of all the various things that are out there to help save consumers more money. So thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Hugh. I actually have a question for you. And P.S. I love that picture. I spend my money on tacos, my gas money on tacos. That's brilliant. And a good prompt. From the Facebook chat section, Kent Minalt asks, could you discuss ways to bring chargers to low-income areas and help them access electric vehicles?
Yes, absolutely. So some of the various ways that we can expand charging access in low-income communities, as we recognize that low-income folks are more likely to be living in multi-unit dwellings, such as apartment buildings. And so EV drivers living in MUDs should not give up on the hope of driving and charging an EV at or near their home. So many organizations, including the Sierra Club, Plug in America, Electric Auto Association, are advocating for policies that remove restrictions for electric vehicle supply equipment installation at these MUDs and apartment buildings, which is crucial to furthering EV adoption in these particular communities. So for example, in California, a community apartment, condominium, or cooperative development must not prohibit or restrict the installation of the EV supply equipment in a homeowner's designated parking space. For example, in Florida, the state allows unit owners of MUDs to install electric vehicle supply equipment at their own expense under certain conditions within the law. There are also other areas in which we can expand charging access as well, primarily through the Volkswagen settlement funds, where increasing EV adoption will require a significant investment in EV charging stations. And experts have identified key areas where charging stations will help accelerate it the most, and identifying the communities that are most burdened and impacted by air pollution, and to make sure that each state's plans to expand charging access with, through the Volkswagen settlement funds prioritizes our low-income communities and those communities that are most burdened by the air pollution. So for example, in Colorado, the state's Volkswagen settlement plans carves out 15% of the maximum funds that's allowed through the settlement, and to place them along points of interest in public areas, grocery stores, malls, and landmarks to give more public access to charging stations. And also in DC, for example, the city prioritizes investments in areas of the city that bear a disproportionate share of the air burden pollution. And those regions were determined by looking at asthma rates in the district and underrepresented neighborhoods as defined by income levels. So those are just various ways in which we can expand access in low-income communities.
Thank you, Hugh. We're going to move on now to Dan Neal. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning automotive critic for the Wall Street Journal and advocate for vehicle electrification and grid modernization. He backs a federal stimulus program featuring shovel-ready grid and charging incentives and vehicle purchase tax credits. Welcome, Dan. Thank you.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely. Hear you just
fantastic.
So tell me more about why you feel like electric vehicles are good for business, good for the business sector.
Well, there were a couple of situations that before coronavirus that made it inevitable and smart to stay ahead of the curve. You know, the auto industry is a global industry, and about 80% of the global auto industry is turning away from the internal combustion engine because of social constraints. Well, business is a herd-like thing, you know, and of course, as it moves toward electrification, it scales up, costs come down because of the economies of scale. Supply lines get sorted out. All of this is a result of these social pressures in Europe and China. But now, coronavirus. Well, you have a situation where they really can't move forward. The automakers really can't go back to business as usual. In particular, the United States auto industry was hanging by a very unsustainable business model that is, you know, leasing $80,000 trucks to people for 8 years. That obviously those days are over, and it should be, because really, you know, the if it's creative destruction we're after, we really need a new regime, a better way to move people in automobiles. And for all the reasons, I have to say, Lloyd rules, Leilani rules, everybody rules. Everybody has spelled out in absolutely perfect detail why mechanically, physically, environmentally, these vehicles are better. Of course, my case is that it's better for business. And so what I want to say to, now this may fall on deaf ears, but what I would like to say is that this nation definitely needs a coordinated stimulus package based around grid modernization and electrification. In your little your video run up, you know, you link these images of that is renewable grid generation and the EV. Well, the essential link is that we have to have a greener, more distributed, grid that walks forward with these kinds of cars. You know, I'm a huge fanboy of one Dr. Mary Nichols, who many of you know is the head of CARB, right? You know, I'm not starstruck by many people, but I'm like, woo, Mary Nichols, because she is such a badass. And she has fought tooth and nail, and she has really kept the American domestic auto industry from falling into more irrelevance than they already have. So, the point is that the world is going forward. We can join them. We can step forward into the light, or we can defend the rump of a failing business model that is based on an obsolete mode de vie and assumptions about what's important in American life. These are transitional times. These values that have come to the fore here all point in the way of a more sustainable transportation and cooler cars. Oh my God, Leilani is exactly right. The cars drive like, you know, fantastically well. I wish I could just shake people by the lapels and say, just drive one for God's sakes, you know.
And actually, that brings me to a question from the Facebook comment section. George Nice asks, speaking of fun, why hasn't an automotive manufacturer made a convertible model electric vehicle? No convertible.
There are really two classes of automobile manufacturers: Tesla and everybody else. And it's, I mean, to be honest, really, Tesla's talking about a 1,000,000-mile battery and a 350 watt-hour energy density and all these technical things that are, in my view, one whole decade ahead of the rest of the industry. So yes, Tesla could do all they want, but the essential insight that Elon had, which was that you would make this appeal based on, I don't know, the psychological, the emotional. It's really an important thing. There are two things that keep EVs from out of the mainstream. One is the psychology of range anxiety. Two is artificially suppressed oil prices. If all of the things you guys have said about EVs are absolutely true and undeniable, but against the backdrop of historically ridiculously negative oil prices, it's a hard argument to make for people who are not looking at the total cost of ownership, which is Americans are not good at that. So but now values are being reevaluated on the fly. I think this is their moment. I really do.
Another question from the comment section from Timothy Moore. Will there ever be another series hybrid like the Chevy Volt?
Well, that's a funny thing, because one of the steps that I would advocate is to leapfrog hybridization of automobiles, because this was a transitional technology to compensate for the lower energy density of batteries in that transitional and adolescent time. Even if you talk to any engineer and a car maker today, they'll say, we are building compliance that will be obsolete in 2 or 3 years. We are spending millions of dollars to comply with laws that are completely obsolete. I would propose a grand bargain, really, a 4-year moratorium that would then initiate a battery electric vehicle revolution, because really batteries have become so energy dense and so power dense, and the packaging has gotten so much smaller that there's no sensible reason to have these machines run on internal combustion. It's just a net loser energy wise. So that's and I think that anybody who drives a car, anybody who knows anything about cars, is going to see those numbers and they're going to go, yeah, that's right.
But there is one on the market right now. It's the BMW i3 range extender.
Can I just, before I go, okay, there are some names I'd like to mention. Sandy Munro, who has been responsible for tearing down the Model 3 and the Model Y on Autoline. He is a reverse engineering expert, and his detailed multi-episode series of tearing down the Model Y to the last nut, bolt, and screw is absolute nerd You know, it's just the best. And check that out. But let's see, what else did I want to say? The Model Y, I can't wait to drive it. It's, you know, it sounds really, really good. And that we need to be able to generalize that technology to other manufacturers. I think that one failure of capitalism is sometimes it inhibits the generalization of a greater good. The Prius is a great example. You know, the only reason the Prius came out and made 50 miles per gallon. Well, if it wasn't for the licensure, the intellectual property, and the patents that Toyota enforced rigorously on that technology could have been generalized and saved hundreds of millions of gallons of gasoline in the interim. And it was all because of commercial pecuniary interest. It was a mistake. It is one of the great blind spots of industrial capitalism.
And one last thing, Bill, this may not be a quick question, but before you go, the economy is in a state right now. And tell me a little bit about how you think electrification of the transportation sector can help to restart the economy right now.
Well, I think there are a couple of, one big hypotheticals that you had a coordinated federal effort, which obviously I think is going to have to wait for another regime. Because that's just not their jam, you know? So, all right, very good. So that means we're going to rely on the states, which is okay because utilities themselves are regional, and they are very site specific. And so a lot of the reform you might see in California first will sort of roll across the country. But the main thing is that for me, if we were able to create a vehicle to grid charging system in any degree, we would save a lot of public money, because the only way we're going to have renewables is to have stationary energy storage. The best way to have stationary energy storage is to share it collaboratively with vehicles that are battery electric. Now, this is a hard thing for people to get a hold of. Plus, you know, it's not exactly, you know, it is collectivism in its most sort of, you know, a naked form. So people are, you know, Americans are a little suspicious of it. But this is the way we save public money 2 or 3 times over.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate all of our amazing speakers. Thank you to Dan, to Roman, to Lloyd, and Leilani, and Hugh. I'm going to wrap us up. And so we had a question from Anthony Asuncion asking, how can people get more involved? And I have a couple things to say about that. Number one is we have a pledge for you to make today. And you can, my colleagues who are on the Facebook page are going to drop the link into the comments. You can also just go to sc.org/deedpledge. What are you going to do after being at this event to help clean transportation take a hold in this country? Now, we list 7 different options just to get your ideas going about how you can be more involved in transitioning our economy to electric transportation. But feel free to come up with your own as well. There's a space for you to do that, to talk about how you're going to take action today, or perhaps in the next week or 2 or month. You can have a conversation with someone about something you learned today. If you already own an electric vehicle, once it's safe to do so, take somebody for a ride who's never been in one. Lots of different options for us to take action. I also want to give you this page of resources, which is also going to be available in the chat and on our Drive Electric Earth Day resources page. You know, lots of different resources about, you know, once you're ready to consider an electric vehicle, there are lots of different places you can go to find the right vehicle for you, if that's both new and used are available. And another thing, please do join our, the three organizations communication lists, right? Sierra Club, Electric Auto Association, and Plug in America all have opportunities for you to get more involved with each of our organizations related to clean transportation.
And Steph, find a regional organization. Around the country, there are local regional organizations doing amazing work to promote and demonstrate electric vehicles, and it's a much more hands-on opportunity as well for people.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Lloyd. So I'll just close today by once again saying thank you so much to Sierra Club, to Plug in America, and Electric Auto Association for co-sponsoring this event. Thank you to all of our speakers, Leilani, Lloyd, Roman, Dan, and Hugh. And again, I'm Steph Larson. And I'm going to close today with a video that maybe you've seen before, but features someone that you will probably recognize. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, and take care. And here comes the video.
Attention customers, I want you to listen very carefully. On behalf of Big Oil, I want to thank you all for choosing muscle cars that use gasoline. Long live American muscles.
Recently, Arnold Schwarzenegger teamed up with Veloce to promote the benefits of electric cars. To show how they save time, money, and the environment, he went undercover as a used car salesman.
Hi, how are you? How are Kleiner?
And tried to sell people gas cars instead.
Hello? Looking for a car? Hey. Howard Kleiner.
Well, Howard
Good to see you, yeah. What are you looking for?
We're looking for, like, electric. Fuel efficient, like, quiet.
I have exactly what you're looking for.
Some kind of electric hybrid mix.
That's all bullshit.
Okay. I'm just tired of spending money at the pump.
The pump?
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. You go to the gas station, you pump. Let me tell you something. The pump sometimes is more satisfying than sex.
I like to be into the carpool lane, actually.
Oh, you mean a sticker? This is your lucky day. Anyone that buys a car today gets a free bumper sticker. I'll be back. Here, carpool lanes are for sissies. I support the oil company monopoly. You can choose any of those.
Battery power car do this?
Right? Go impress your neighbors.
This is testosterone. Yes. My friend got an electric car and he got a tax credit.
You want a tax credit or do you want to have street credit? It's too crowded right now, right? Gasoline cars create pollution and it curbs population. It brings it down. That is the idea.
That's not the way to go about that. So quiet in here. I love it.
But that's the problem, you see? Because it's so quiet that you hear literally everything that your family says. Think about that for a second. You don't like the car, huh?
I do like the car.
I love the smell of exhaust. The smell is...
That's what we didn't want.
No, you know, actually, can I just get a supervisor in here?
Could I be so please supervisor?
Can we get a
Can we speak
supervisor?
to the manager?
All right, let me get the manager, all right?
Okay.
All right.
I'm getting hungry and grouchy.
Yeah, me too. Hello, I'm Harry, the sales manager. You ask for me? How can I help you? Electric cars save money, time, and environment without sacrificing any of the fun and excitement of driving. And with over 40 available makes and models, you've never had more reasons to go electric. Go to electricforall.org and join us.
That's awesome.
Now, come with me if you want a lift. If it burns gas, we got it.
See more videos, Learn about electric cars and find the one that's right for you. Visit electricforall.org.
Oh, Arnold, gotta love it.